The spaceport of Vera Prime was alive with the hum of trade voices, the clang of machinery, and the strange sense of worlds far beyond the human homeworld. Daniel walked through the bustling crowd, his stride steady, his head turning only enough to keep track of those who passed too close. The light from the station's high windows spilled across his body and caught in the smooth metallic sheen of what everyone assumed was a suit of battle armor. The plates glimmered in silver and faint blue, shifting gently as if with each breath, yet there was no sound of servos, no hiss of hydraulics, nothing to suggest mechanical assistance. Had been here before, but rarely in the open markets of the central hall. He preferred to keep to the freight corridors or the docking rings where fewer eyes followed him. Yet today, he had a reason to walk through the main concourse. He was looking for a shipment that had been held back by a local trade guild, and to find it he needed to speak directly with their representative. That representative was known to spend her time in the high balcony, overlooking the market square, and that was exactly where he was heading. Crowd parted a little as he moved through, and though no one said anything out loud, he could feel the weight of their stares. Merchants paused in the middle of haggling freighter crews, nudged each other, and whispered their guesses as to which military he served. Some thought he was a mercenary, others imagined he was a champion from one of the war zones beyond the rim. Daniel ignored the glances. He had grown used to them since the change many years ago. Halfway across the market, a voice rose above the usual din. It was clear and measured, but carried the tone of curiosity rather than fear. A tall figure stepped into his path, a woman whose pale skin shimmered faintly in the light, like the surface of a pearl. Her eyes were wide and intelligent, and her long robe suggested a position of status. She studied him for a moment before speaking. "Nice armor," she noted, tilting her head slightly as if trying to catch the design from a better angle. Her gaze lingered on the contours of his chest and the smooth connection at his neck, where no seam broke the surface. Daniel stopped and regarded her evenly. There was no hostility in her voice, only interest, yet he had heard this same comment countless times. He gave her the truth without hesitation. "This is my body, not armor." His tone was steady, his words plain and unadorned. For a moment she stood completely still, as if her mind was trying to rearrange the meaning of what she had just heard. The market noise seemed to fade around them. The woman blinked once, twice, then leaned back slightly, studying him from head to toe, as if she expected to see some hidden line or opening to prove him wrong. She found none. The surface of his body caught the light in a way that no ordinary alloy could. It seemed alive, shifting subtly, as if responding to her gaze. "You mean," she began, then stopped, searching for the right words. "You mean that is flesh?" He nodded. "A form of it, yes. Though most would not recognize it as such." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The faint hum of a nearby vendor's booth filled the gap between them, and for a brief instant she seemed at a loss for what to say. Daniel stepped to the side to continue on his way, but she moved with him, her curiosity clearly stronger than her sense of propriety. "How is that possible?" she asked. "Finally, if it is your body, then how does it move like metal and shine like that?" "It looks forged, not grown." He did not answer at once. Instead, he let his eyes pass over the balcony, where he had been heading. The guild representative was still there, leaning on the railing, watching the scene below. Perhaps it would be better to let this conversation play out before moving forward. With a small gesture, Daniel indicated a nearby alcove where the crowd was thinner, and they stepped away from the main path. There, in the quieter corner, the woman studied him more closely. She reached out but stopped herself a finger's length from his shoulder. The surface looked smooth enough to slide under her touch, yet there was a sense of hidden strength, as if it could resist any pressure. Daniel spoke again. "It is not forged, it is grown. This body is human, though changed. It has been made to endure places where no armor could work long enough to save the one wearing it." She tilted her head again, and for the first time he saw the faintest sign of disbelief curl at the edge of her mouth. "Humans cannot do this," she said softly. No being can without losing themselves. You would be machine, not man. He held her gaze. This is not machine. This is me. Every part of it alive, every part of it mine. The light shifted again across his surface as he moved, and she drew in a slow breath, still trying to decide if what she saw was wonder or something she should fear. Somewhere above them, a deep chime rang out, marking the half hour, and the market crowd shifted as traders called for deals before the next break. The moment was not broken, however, for her eyes stayed fixed on him as if the rest of the world had faded to a blur. Her mind was no doubt turning through every rumor she had heard about humans, every whispered tale of their stubbornness, their adaptability, their refusal to yield to the limits of flesh. Daniel finally stepped back toward the main path. His business with the guild could wait a moment longer, for he knew this conversation was only at its beginning. She still had many questions, and in truth, he did not mind answering a few, though the answers might unsettle her more than she expected. As they walked toward the center of the hall, her steps were careful, her eyes flicking to the onlookers, who stared openly, now drawn by the strange sight of the silver-skinned human and the diplomat in deep conversation. She was still trying to grasp the idea that what she saw was not armor at all, but the man himself. The market was still busy, yet the air between Daniel and the woman carried a weight of unspoken questions. She kept pace beside him, her robe swaying lightly as they crossed into a quieter wing of the spaceport. This section was lined with tall glass walls, showing the endless dark of space beyond, and the streaking lights of passing vessels. Sound here was softer, the voices of traders replaced by the hum of climate systems and the distant thrum of docking clamps locking into place. Her name, he learned, was Alira, and she was not merely a diplomat, but an envoy tasked with monitoring unusual travelers entering Vera Prime. Her work had taught her to recognize every known armor style in the nearby systems, yet she had never seen anything like what Daniel wore, or rather what Daniel was. That difference gnawed at her curiosity, and she was not the type to leave a mystery unsolved. She asked again in a quieter voice, "Tell me how it is possible. A body like that does not happen by chance." Daniel walked slowly, his gaze on the distant ships outside, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he began to explain humans had ventured far long before they understood how hostile most worlds could be. Early explorers wore heavy suits, but even the strongest designs failed against sudden radiation storms, acid rains, or predators capable of tearing steel plates apart. In those days, survival often meant retreat, but humans are not built to run from every challenge. Over time, he said, they began to adapt, not by building thicker shells, but by making the shell part of themselves. The first steps were medical implants, tiny machines in the blood that could repair damage faster than normal. Then came changes to the skin layers, woven with microscopic strands, stronger than any alloy, but still alive, responsive, and able to grow. These layers learned to harden when struck, to soften when comfort was needed, to seal instantly against vacuum or toxins. Process was slow over generations, yet it never stopped. Humans who traveled farther and faced harsher places were changed more deeply until their bodies were no longer bound by the old limits. Alira listened without interrupting. She could see the truth in the way his surface shifted in the light, tiny ripples passing as muscles moved beneath the armored skin. She had seen mechanical plating before, and it was always separate from the flesh it protected. But here there was no boundary. It was seamless, alive, and almost beautiful in its own strange way. She finally said, "If this is true, then your people have made themselves into something the rest of us will never match. You could walk on the surface of a burning moon or swim in the depths of a methane ocean." Daniel's head tilted slightly as if he had heard that before. "Perhaps," he said, "but it is not only strength. We feel everything through this skin. The air, the heat, the weight of a touch. Nothing is dulled. It is still human in every sense." They reached a small lounge at the edge of the wing, and Daniel stopped near the viewing deck. The glass stretched high above them, revealing the curve of the station's orbital ring. Alira stepped beside him, her eyes flicking between him and the stars beyond. What do you lose? She asked quietly. Surely something is given up for such a gift. Daniel considered the question. He could have said nothing, but there was no harm in truth. Some things are lost, he admitted. The change is permanent. You cannot return to the old body, and there are those who see us as weapons before they see us as people. Some worlds will not let us land without escort. Others whisper about what else we might be able to do. That is the price. Alira thought about this in silence. The hum of passing ships filled the gap. Between their words, she could understand fear in others, for she too had felt a flicker of it when he first told her the truth. Yet alongside that fear, there was a growing sense of respect. He was not boasting nor trying to impress. Instead, he spoke as one might speak of a long and difficult journey, a road that had shaped him into what he was now. From behind them, the faint shuffle of footsteps drew near. A group of local security officers entered the lounge, their expressions cautious. One of them, a tall figure with deep blue markings on his skin, looked directly at Daniel. His voice was polite but firm. We have had reports of a heavily armed visitor walking the market. We will need to verify your weapons are legal. Daniel turned to face them, his stance calm. I am carrying no weapons. This is my body. The officers glanced at each other, clearly unsure of how to handle that response. The blue-marked leader stepped closer, scanning Daniel's frame with a handheld device. The screen flickered, showing strange readings, unlike any standard armor signature. It confirmed living tissue laced with unknown composite structures. The officer lowered the device, his tone softer. I see. This is unusual, but not forbidden here. Still, there are those who may challenge you. Daniel simply nodded. He had expected as much. He knew that in every new place, someone would question him, test him, sometimes even try to break him. Alira watched this exchange with a mix of unease and fascination. She could already sense the whispers starting among the station's officials and traders about the human with a body of living armor. As the officers left, Alira turned back to him. You realize, she said, that someone will try to prove your body is not what you claim. Daniel's faint smile held no fear. Let them try. He stepped away from the viewing deck, his eyes scanning the market paths below. From the look in them, she could tell he had faced far worse challenges than the disbelief of strangers. And in that moment, Alira understood something else entirely. This was not only a man who had adapted to survive hostile worlds. This was someone who carried his own history etched into every living plate of his skin, and anyone who doubted it would learn the truth in ways they might never forget. Whisper of rumors spread faster than the movement of the crowd. By the time Daniel and Alira left the quieter wing of the station and returned toward the main concourse, the air had already changed. Traders leaned closer to their neighbors, speaking in low voices. Dock workers paused in the middle of hauling crates, and even the automated drones seemed to slow as if drawn to the growing tension. A few bold onlookers followed them at a distance, waiting to see what would happen next. It did not take long for the challenge to arrive near the open plaza, where a wide circle of polished stone served as the marketplace. Center, a tall armored guard stepped into their path. His armor was segmented in heavy plates of dark bronze, a design built for intimidation as much as for protection. The guard's voice carried easily over the hum of the crowd. I have heard they claim that this is no armor but flesh. Let us see if that is true. Alira moved quickly between them, her voice firm. This man is a guest under my watch, and is not bound to prove himself to satisfy curiosity. But the guard's eyes never left Daniel. He raised a gauntlet hand toward the outer edge of the plaza, where a smaller ring of reinforced walls enclosed what looked like an arena. We have rules here, he said. If a visitor claims to carry no weapons, yet appears prepared for war, they may submit to a controlled demonstration to prove their claim. It is voluntary, but refusal will be remembered. Daniel regarded him without visible irritation. The tone was not openly hostile, yet the weight behind the words was clear. This was not only about proving a claim, but about showing the crowd whether the stranger was to be respected or doubted. He glanced toward Alira and saw the slight narrowing of her eyes. She understood the risk, but she also knew that refusing could leave him branded as a fraud in every corner of the station. "Very well," Daniel said. His voice was calm and steady. "Lead the way." The guard nodded and turned toward the arena. A murmur swept through the gathered people as they followed. The arena itself was not large compared to military training grounds, but its walls were high enough to contain weapons tests, and its floor bore the marks of past trials, charred streaks from energy blasts and deep scars where kinetic strikes had landed. Daniel stepped inside, and the gate closed behind him. The bronze-armored guard remained at the edge while another figure entered, carrying a long staff that crackled faintly with contained plasma. The announcer, a broad-shouldered alien with skin like polished stone, explained the terms clearly. The challenger would deliver a series of attacks designed to test the integrity of the supposed armor. No lethal force would be used, but the strikes would be strong enough to damage most conventional suits. Daniel gave a single nod indicating his readiness. The first blow came fast. The staff struck across his side in a sweeping arc. The plasma flared bright on impact, but instead of leaving a burn, it scattered in a ripple of light across Daniel's skin. The surface seemed to harden instantly, taking the energy and dispersing it without leaving a mark. The crowd gasped, some leaning forward to see if the human would stumble, but he did not move more than half a step. The challenger struck again, this time driving the staff down toward his shoulder. The metallic surface of his body shifted subtly, reshaping itself at the point of contact. The blow landed with a sound more like stone meeting stone than flesh meeting weapon. Again, there was no injury, only the faint glow fading across his skin. The announcer called for the second phase. Kinetic projectiles were fired from automated turrets positioned along the wall. The slugs were fast enough to dent thick plating, but each one flattened or deflected as if striking an unyielding shield. The impact sent small vibrations through the arena floor. Yet Daniel stood unmoved, his eyes following each incoming shot, as though watching a light show rather than an attack by. Now the crowd had grown loud with voices of disbelief. Some called it trickery, others demanded stronger tests. The announcer obliged, calling for a final measure. A plasma rifle was brought forward at settings, locked at the maximum allowed by safety protocols. The guard handling it hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether this was wise, but Daniel stepped closer until he stood within the marked distance. The shot rang out in a sharp burst of light, striking square at his chest. The flare of heat was blinding for an instant, but when it cleared, Daniel was still there, unburned, unbroken. The surface of his chest glowed faintly for a second, before cooling back to its natural sheen. Silence filled the arena for a long heartbeat. Then voices rose again, not in doubt, but in awe. Even those who had suspected him of deception were forced to admit what they saw could not be explained by ordinary armor. The bronze-armored guard stepped forward, his tone now carrying respect. "You have proven your claim. This station will not doubt you again." Daniel inclined his head in acknowledgement. He had not come here to win admiration, but he knew the value of earning respect in unfamiliar territory. Alira approached, her expression caught somewhere between relief and astonishment. "You did not hesitate," she said quietly. "You knew you could withstand it." Daniel's gaze remained on the crowd beyond the walls. "I have been through worse." As they left the arena, the whispers followed them. But the tone had changed. What had begun as curiosity had shifted into something deeper. The people had seen with their own eyes that the silver sheen was not a machine wrapped around a man, but a living part of him. One child perched on her father's shoulders whispered the words, "I want to be like him someday," and the father only nodded, unable to hide the wonder in his own voice. Back in the main concourse, the flow of the market resumed. Though eyes still tracked Daniel's movements, he felt no need to rush now, for the challenge had served another purpose beyond proving his nature. It had opened the door to conversations that would have been closed to a stranger. Alira seemed to realize this as well. She walked beside him, her earlier questions replaced with a thoughtful silence, as If she was beginning to see the larger picture of what he represented, for Daniel, the test had been nothing more than another moment in a long history of proving himself to those who doubted, yet he knew this station and its people would remember him long after he left, and perhaps that memory would shape the stories told about humans here in the years to come. They moved away from the noise of the market and the echoes of the arena, leaving behind the crowd still buzzing with excitement. The corridors ahead were quieter, lit with a softer glow from the overhead panels, and lined with polished metal walls broken only by the occasional viewports that opened into the vastness of space. Alira walked beside Daniel, her steps measured, her mind still processing what she had seen. She had known the humans' claim was bold, but she had not expected such absolute proof. When they reached a private observation room high in the station's mid-level, she motioned for him to enter. Doors slid closed behind them, sealing away the background noise. Inside, the air felt calmer. The glass wall before them looked out over the curve of Vera Prime, far below, a planet wrapped in layers of cloud that glowed faintly under the light of its distant sun. Alira stood with her hands clasped behind her back before speaking again. "You could have refused that test," she said. "Many do when challenged by the arena guards, yet you agreed without hesitation." Daniel stepped closer to the glass, studying the patterns of the clouds before answering. "I have learned that refusing only feeds doubt. It is better to face it directly and leave." No question. She studied him for a long moment. Her voice softened when she finally asked, "Why make yourself this way? What drives a person to change so deeply that even their own kind might not recognize them?" Daniel's eyes stayed on the horizon, beyond the glass, but his words carried the weight of memory. The choice was not for pride or display, it was for survival. He told her of the early voyages when human explorers reached systems no one else dared to enter, worlds bathed in deadly radiation, atmospheres heavy with corrosive gases, landscapes torn by storms that could strip metal bare within hours. On those worlds, conventional armor failed, not because it was weak, but because it could not adapt fast enough to sudden change. The environment would find the smallest flaw in the suit's seal, the tiniest weakness in its material, and exploit it. Humans adapted the way they always had, through trial, error, and relentless persistence. First came the implants, tiny machines in the bloodstream, capable of repairing damage from within. Then the skin was reinforced with living fibers, tougher than any alloy, yet still able to stretch and flex as flesh should. Over time, these changes merged into something greater, not a layer to be worn and removed, but a part of the body itself, able to respond instantly to whatever danger arose. The process took generations to perfect, and those who underwent it knew they would never return to the bodies they had before. Alira listened, her expression unreadable. Though her people had their own forms of enhancement, none were so complete, so irreversible, and none had ever blended living tissue and engineered material so seamlessly. Her mind kept returning to what she had seen in the arena, the way his skin had flowed to meet each blow, the way it had absorbed energy and shrugged off force as if it were a natural reflex. Daniel continued, speaking, his tone quieter. "Now humans are fragile compared to many species out here. We do not have claws or scales, thick hides, or natural toxins. Our strength has always been our ability to adapt. We build what we need, we learn what we must. But there comes a point when tools are not enough, when the only way forward is to become the tool." She turned to face him completely. "You speak as though this was not just a technological achievement, but a part of your culture." He gave a faint nod. "It became that over time. Those who carried these changes became explorers of the most dangerous regions. Their stories spread and others followed. Some worlds welcomed them, others feared them. There are still places I cannot go without being seen as a threat." Alira could understand why. The sight of a living being that could withstand weapons, fire, and environmental hazards without external gear would unsettle any cautious leader. Yet she could also see the deeper truth in his words. This was not about making a soldier. This was about making a survivor. Light from the planet below shifted as the station turned, slowly in its orbit, casting a soft golden hue across the room. Alira stepped closer to the glass, her reflection appearing faintly beside his. "You must know," she said, "that this makes you something unique, even among your own people." Daniel's mouth curved in the faintest smile. "Unique perhaps, but not alone. There are others like me scattered across the colonies, each with their own path, each shaped by the places they have endured. We are not a separate race. We are simply human, taken a little further than most are willing to go." She studied him again this time, not as a curiosity, but as a living record of what humans could become. She thought of the history she had read about them, the battles survived, the impossible journeys completed, always with some mix of ingenuity and stubborn will. Seeing him now, she realized those stories might not have captured the full extent of that truth. The silence between them was steady, not awkward. The hum of the station's systems filled it like a low heartbeat. Outside, a transport ship moved slowly past the viewport, its lights blinking against the darkness. For a moment, Alira considered what it would mean if more humans adopted such a form, whether it would shift the balance of power in the explored regions, whether other species would see it as a step toward peace, through resilience, or as a threat to be countered. Daniel seemed to sense her thoughts. People fear what they do not understand. It is the same everywhere, but fear can fade when replaced with knowledge. That is why I do not hide what I am. She nodded slowly, understanding more than she had at the start of their meeting. This was why he had walked openly through the market, knowing it would draw attention, why he had accepted the challenge without argument. It was not arrogance, it was a kind of quiet diplomacy. A soft chime from the room's console broke their moment, indicating an incoming message. Alira checked the display, then turned back to him. "The guild representative you were looking for is ready to see you." She paused before adding, "I will escort you. It would be better if they hear your story from someone who has already seen the truth." Daniel inclined his head in agreement, and together they left the observation room. The corridor ahead stretched toward the administrative sector, its floor reflecting the glow of overhead lights as they walked. Alira glanced at him once more, still struck by the contrast between the man and the myth she had first assumed him to be. Now she knew the truth was far more complex and in its own way far more remarkable. They walked to the administrative sector, took them along a curved hallway that wrapped around the outer ring of the station. Beyond the wide viewing panels, the vast black of space stretched without end, broken only by the glint of distant stars and the slow passage of transport vessels. The hum of the corridor's machinery was steady, like the pulse of some giant living thing. Alira walked slightly ahead but slowed her steps, so Daniel remained beside her. Her mind was busy preparing the right words to introduce him to the guild representative, for she knew that the man waiting in that office was not easily impressed. When they reached the entrance, two guards stood outside, their posture rigid and their eyes sharp. Alira spoke briefly, identifying herself and her guest. The guards stepped aside, and the heavy door slid open, revealing a room filled with a soft golden light. From overhead fixtures, the air smelled faintly of polished metal and old books. The guild representative sat behind a wide desk of dark alloy, his hands folded before him. His name was Vareen, a man known for his influence and his skill in reading people. Vareen's eyes moved over Daniel the moment they entered. The faint narrowing of his gaze suggested he had already heard the rumors from the market. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he studied Daniel as one might study an unusual artifact, waiting to see if it revealed anything without being touched. Alira broke the silence. She explained who Daniel was, why he had come, and the nature of the misunderstanding that had drawn so much attention in the marketplace. When she reached the part about the arena test, Vareen's expression shifted slightly. Not surprise exactly, but a deeper focus, as though weighing the implications. His voice was calm when he finally spoke. "I have heard of humans who modify themselves for survival in hostile places, but I have never seen one with my own eyes. You have walked into my station and into the center of my market, looking as if you carry the strongest armor made. Yet you claim it is not armor at all. Daniel met his gaze. Without flinching, it is my body. It is what keeps me alive where nothing else can. Varun leaned back in his chair considering this. Then he asked a question Daniel had not been expecting. Why are you here on Vera Prime? What do you seek? Daniel replied. With the same steady tone he had used with Alira, I came for a shipment that was delayed by your guild. The cargo contains equipment for an outpost on the edge of the Narva's expanse. Without it, the people there will be exposed to conditions they cannot withstand for long. Something in his voice must have reached Varun because the guild leader's eyes softened slightly. Still he asked, and why should I trust that this equipment will reach them? That is a dangerous region, and many who enter do not return. Daniel answered, because I will be the one to take it to them. For a moment the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the air system. Varun studied him again, now not as a curiosity but as a man making a promise. Finally he gave a small nod. The cargo will be released to you. I will have it ready within the hour, but be warned. There are those in this sector who will see you as more than a courier. They will see you as a prize or as a threat. Daniel's reply was simple. I have been seen that way before. It will not stop me. Alira watched this exchange with a quiet satisfaction. She had worried that Varun might challenge Daniel's presence or refuse the shipment altogether, but the human's directness had cut through the usual layers of negotiation. When they left the office, the guards outside glanced at Daniel with the same curiosity she had seen in the market. Yet there was also a hint of respect. They made their way back toward the docking bays where the cargo would be loaded. Daniel walked with the same calm stride he had when she first saw him, yet something about him seemed different now, perhaps because she understood more of what lay beneath the silver sheen of his body. In the distance the sound of loading machinery echoed through the corridors, followed by the low rumble of transport engines warming for departure. At the cargo platform, workers moved quickly, securing containers to the hold of Daniel's vessel. The ship itself was functional and unadorned, built for endurance rather than display. Its hull bore the faint scars of past journeys, each one a mark of places survived rather than simply visited. Daniel oversaw the loading, checking each container's seals and markings. Alira stood nearby, speaking briefly with the foreman to ensure there were no last-minute obstacles. When the final container was locked into place, Daniel turned to her. You have been a fair guide, Alira. You ask questions not to challenge, but to understand. There are not many who would do the same. She met his gaze. I only wanted the truth, and now I have it. She hesitated for a moment before adding, there will be others who doubt you, perhaps even fear you. But I hope when they speak of humans they will remember what I saw today. Daniel gave a faint smile. That is all I could ask for. Call came from the ship's console, signaling that departure clearance had been granted. The workers stepped back from the ramp, and the clamps disengaged with a deep metallic thud. Daniel walked up the ramp and paused at the top, looking back toward the station. Alira stood with her hands clasped, watching him. She was not a person given to sentiment, yet she felt a strange sense of pride in seeing him go. As the ramp lifted and sealed, the vessel's engines began their slow build to power. The deep hum resonated through the platform. The ship rose smoothly from its berth, turning toward the great dark beyond the station lights. From the observation windows, Alira could see it angled toward the Narva's expanse, where the faint shimmer of a distant nebula marked the edge of known space. She knew the journey ahead for him would not be easy. The expanse was a place where storms could tear through a hull in minutes and predators swam through the void between worlds. Yet she also knew he would face it as he had faced everything else, with the unyielding strength of a man whose very body had been shaped for survival. As the ship's light became a small glimmer against the black, her thoughts returned to the first moment she had spoken to him in the market, when she had called his body armor, and he had told her it was not. She understood now that it was more than a correction. It was a statement of identity, a truth carried not as a boast but as a quiet fact. And she knew that somewhere out in the deep unknown, others would learn that same truth, just as she had the end.